Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott. Hodge, no hat today.
I'm letting the big, beautiful bald head breathe, boys. We got it. We got it out. We got a fresh shave. We got a fresh trim. It's been so hot this summer. Feels good to let the heat just radiate off. Feels wonderful.
I kind of want to go over there and rub it, but
Whoa,
is that just me?
Whoa. It's just took a turn.
You know, sort of feel it all up. I bet it's real smooth.
At least there won't be anybody in the comments saying, Hodge, why are you wearing hats from non-Canadian football leagues? Well, let me tell you, people, Hodge can wear whatever hat he wants, okay? He actually has a pretty cool collection, but he's letting it, I was going to say flow today, but I suppose that's not the right word.
Just wait until I pull up my Western Mustangs hat just for you.
Sadly, that's not allowed.
This is a family-friendly podcast. We can't have whatever language would emerge if you wore that hat.
I'll say this, though. If your friends at the University of Guelph want to send me a hat, I'll proudly wear it on the show.
Talk to head coach Mark Soria about that. Perhaps we can have that arranged. Notice how I didn't say the name. Hodge said it first.
Yeah.
True. All right, boys, let's get to it. We're discussing the BC Lions' horrid start to the 2026 CFL season.
Controversial penalty on Samuel Emilus.
Vernon Adams Jr. continuing to leg it up.
3DownNation's annual CFL and Canadians in NFL training camp list.
The Ottawa Redblacks bringing back Lewis Ward.
Lorenzo Mauldin IV coming out of retirement.
And the 2027 CFL Combine heading to Cowtown. But first, Toronto Argonauts quarterback Chad Kelly suffered a neck injury shortly before halftime in his team's 26-12 win over the BC Lions in Week 8. Darnell Sankey hit Kelly's helmet with his shoulder, wrenching the quarterback's neck awkwardly in the process. That shot drew a penalty for roughing the passer. Kelly is now the fourth franchise quarterback to get hurt over the past month, joining Zach Collaros in Week 5, Bo Levi Mitchell in that same game, and Nathan Rourke in Week 7. Was Sankey's hit on Kelly a dirty one?
I don't think it's dirty. And look, JC wrote a great column off of Sankey's side of the story, so I'll let JC kind of share Sankey's side of it. To me, a penalty and a dirty hit are not the same thing. The hit was certainly a penalty. I don't think it was dirty. And this is something that Cheese has talked about on the show for years that initially I didn't really agree with, admittedly, but I've come around more and more, which is that when quarterbacks slide, or I suppose any player, though overwhelmingly it's quarterbacks who slide, I think there's honestly more harm than good a lot of the time. You give yourself up, and so often quarterbacks wait until the last possible millisecond to slide. And it puts defenders in an impossible situation where they have to react, and they have to react in a period of time that's not even really fair or realistic for them to react. And I think the CFL has done a good job with this rule. A few years ago, if you slid as a quarterback, you got all of the forward progress. And so defenders were put in a tricky spot where they simultaneously had to legally hit the quarterback, but they also felt pressure to stop the slide of the quarterback. The CFL since corrected this, saying, okay, the second you start sliding, you no longer get forward progress. And that theoretically now means as a defender, you don't even have to hit the quarterback. But the problem with that is if a defender is already committed to laying a blow and then the quarterback starts sliding after the fact, all we've done now is taken a shot to someone's abdomen and potentially turn it into a shot to somebody's head. And that's exactly what happened here. So I don't want to blame Kelly for this. This is not a Chad Kelly specific criticism. It's league wide where quarterbacks slide late, and they slide late partly for the advantage, right? The later they slide, the more forward progress they get. But more and more often these days, we see this situation play out where someone slides to theoretically lessen a blow, right? Lessen the chance of injury. And all it does is make them more vulnerable. And then an injury happens. Now, fortunately, TSN has reported that Kelly is not expected to miss any time. The Argonauts are heading into a bye week. They return to the field in week 10. And that's a win for everybody because, as we've seen in Winnipeg, without Collaros, to a greater extent, Bo Levi Mitchell in Hamilton, and an even greater extent, Nathan Rourke in BC, the quarterback play from your number one to your number two as a league-wide level is just been far too great. The drop-off has made some of these games. I don't think week 7 or week 8 was a bad week of football, but it wasn't nearly at the level we saw from a lot of these games to start the year where everybody was healthy under center. So it looks like Kelly is going to be fine, which is great news, of course, but I still have a challenge with this concept in general, because when someone is already laying the wood as a defender, suddenly ducking and getting your head involved in the hit is maybe not the smartest option for any quarterback.
I am absolutely thrilled that I was able to convert you to the church of no slide, because I've been banging that drum for years and I remain a true believer. Now, I didn't think this was a particularly late slide by Chad Kelly. How you define a late slide, I think, is a matter up for interpretation. But to me, he gave the defenders enough time to react. With that said, this was an illegal play by Darnell Sankey. And whether you think it's a dirty play, I think depends on how you define that particular language. If you think that any play that is illegal and dangerous is a dirty play, then this absolutely qualifies, right? The penalty was well-deserved. There was a hit to the head here on a sliding quarterback. Whether or not you believe quarterbacks should be allowed to slide to begin with, it happened, and it was correctly officiated. So that, if that's your definition, that's a dirty play. If it's intent that you care about, a guy actively going out there trying to injure another player, I don't think that there was intent here. I believe Darnell Sankey when he tells me in the locker room that he's just going out there trying to make a tackle. A guy goes down late by his interpretation, and he's still going through the motions, and the hit to the head happens quite by accident. I don't believe he's the type of person who goes out there with hate in his heart to injure other players. It doesn't change the result of the play, but if you feel that intent is necessary for it to be dirty, I don't believe there was intent there. Now, if you're Darnell Sankey, you believe that there was a dirty play involved in that particular situation, and that was Peter Nicastro coming in late when you're on the ground after the hit on Chad Kelly, drilling you from behind and then giving you the ground and pound. He called that a blatant cheap shot. And, as much as I like that sort of toughness as a former offensive lineman and protection of your quarterback, I have to agree that it was also an illegal play by Nicastro to come in and take out a vulnerable opponent. Do I believe it's going to get the same level of fine and attention from the CFL like Sankey would probably like it to? Absolutely not. But you can't judge one aspect of the play and not the other simply because one triggered it and one was the end result of a player trying to protect his teammate when the harm had already been done. It was retribution, and that's also something that we should get out of the game. Nicastro was rightly penalized. Sankey was rightly penalized. I think the refs got it right in this circumstance, and any fines that should be awarded are probably minor ones on both sides.
I don't think there was an intent to injure by Darnell Sankey on this particular play, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, fellas. It is getting so hard to hit a quarterback even in the pocket, let alone now when he's outside the pocket and sliding. In any professional football league, but specifically the Canadian Football League, because the league's trying to protect quarterbacks. And I get it. We want the starters to be on the field from a fan perspective, a media perspective, for the league to put its best product on the field. That totally makes sense. But if you're Darnell Sankey in this situation, and we've had similar ones in the past, you're trying to gauge whether or not you think Chad Kelly is perhaps going to fake a slide and keep running, or juke somebody in the middle of the field and keep going on a long run, because we've seen that in the past. So if you're Sankey, you don't want to be made into a meme like Nick Arbuckle did to him later on in the game, because you're not quite sure if an elite athlete like Chad Kelly is going to go to the ground or keep going. Now, to a lot of people, when you slow it down, it seems very simple. But people need to remember that in the heat of the battle, and yes, I do think football is a 60-minute battle, much different than the war. I usually don't like saying battle in terms of sports, but I do think football is a 60-minute physical battle. That decision has to happen in a split second, as fast as you can snap your fingers, and probably even faster, to be quite honest. So for that to happen at full speed, Sankey is pursuing the ball carrier, in this case happens to be Chad Kelly, sees him slide. Now he has to throw on the brakes as fast as he possibly can. And even if you're driving a Porsche 911, that thing takes some time to come to a screeching halt. And Sankey is a bigger, more run stuffing type of linebacker, so it takes some time for him to slow down. I do think we need to protect quarterbacks, but the more that I see these types of hits happen, I side on the defender's end of it, because I think it's so difficult to hit the quarterbacks. Is it unfortunate that Chad Kelly had to leave the football game? Undoubtedly so. He was cooking. He had thrown for almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the opening half and looked really great, was playing high-quality offensive football, which is what the majority of people, it seems like in this day and age, want to see. So I don't want to downplay that part of it, but I also want to double-click on what JC said. The backside part of this, Sankey is a player too. And these other situations have happened in the past, but since it's here and now, I think we need to talk about it. There needs to be more protection for what I would agree with Sankey on was a cheap shot from Nick Castro. I understand you're protecting your franchise quarterback, and I would want to see my offensive linemen do the exact same thing. But we're talking about 2 football players ultimately in Chad Kelly and Darnell Sankey. So why does one have more protection afforded to them than the others? Because if you talk to non-quarterbacks around the Canadian Football League, they'll tell you the scales have really tilted in favor of the quarterbacks. And I get it. The hardest position to play. We want to protect those franchise quarterbacks, but the other players on the field deserve protection too. So I hope Nick Castro is hit with a fine and realizes that we can't have that kind of junk in our game in the Canadian Football League.
Fortunately, after this occurred, I forget which quarterback it was, admittedly, but at the collegiate level in the NCAA, the CFL does have a rule against fake slides. That said, I think a much better solution is what we see. Who was it, JC?
Kenny Pickett.
Oh, Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. That's right. I think a better way to go about it is a play that we frankly see all the time. If you're a receiver who catches a quick slant, a quick hitch, a curl, whatever you want to call it, it happens all the time that they make that catch 7 yards down the field. They turn their head. They see 3 defenders shelled behind them, waiting to take their block off. And the receiver just falls down and takes the first down. Or sometimes there's like a little bit of a forward diving motion, but they don't go down feet first, where their head is sticking up and vulnerable. They go down head first, where they can kind of protect their head, if anything, with the rest of their body. So receivers know how to protect themselves. Yes, it's not necessarily maximizing yardage, but if I have the choice between getting 5 yards on first down or 7 yards, I'm happy to take 5 if I know my quarterback's not going to get hit in the head. Rather than, okay, quarterback might get a hit in the head because they're sliding too late, and with their head up. But hey, we'll get those extra 2 yards. Like, no, we'll get those
But
next
you
2
don't
yards
know,
on the next
though.
play.
Hodge, you don't know. And it's professional football. Those 2 yards could add up at the end of the game to be a difference, right? 2nd and 5 versus 2nd and 3 is different. And I think it's hard to tell a competitor in the heat of the moment to dive head first or to not try to get those extra yards. I know what you're saying.
All
It's
I'm
well
saying
warranted.
is receivers leave yards on the field all the time to try to minimize the hits.
They're
And
not trying to escape the pocket and some big dudes running after them with their eyes still down the field and perhaps make a play. Like, that's a fine line we're talking about walking again in a split second.
I'm just saying it happens all the time that guys give themselves up in this game. There's only one position where we're sliding, and that I don't see those same injuries on the receiver side. The BC Lions have now fallen to 1-5 following their 26-12 loss to the Toronto Argonauts. Chase Bryce struggled in his first career start, completing 14 of 25 pass attempts for 163 yards, and was eventually benched for rookie Caden Salter. Heads have started to roll elsewhere, with former CFL most outstanding offensive lineman Dejon Allen being released. With the team 4 points out of a playoff spot and Nathan Rourke's status unclear, how much confidence do you have in the Lions being a playoff team in 2026?
I have no confidence whatsoever at this stage. And that's not to say it's impossible for the Lions to make the playoffs. They're even unlikely. I think there's a path there where they can overtake the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and certainly get into a crossover spot with how some of the things are shaking out in the East Division, but they haven't proven it yet. And we don't know how long Nathan Rourke will be out. It's weeks rather than months. It could be this week if he wants to push it and rush back. It could be in a couple of weeks, but he's not going to be out for the long term. But when he returns, what situation is this team going to be in? Because Chase Bryce was not good enough in this game against Toronto. He was abysmal, and he was abysmal the week before. And I don't know how you can continue to go in that direction. Now, does Caden Salter potentially give you a better opportunity to win? I would say so, but you're talking about a very raw rookie who has huge upside, but also huge downside in terms of some of the dangerous plays that he can make and some of the struggles he's had with accuracy in his collegiate career as well. Like, this is a very raw player that needs time to develop. And BC just can't afford to be waiting around stacking up the losses because of how good every other team is in the West Division, right? The Edmonton Elks are a legit contender. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are a legit contender. I would argue that the Calgary Stampeders are a legit contender. And I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are a functional football team that at this stage of the game is better off than the BC Lions. Like, the fact that you have to catch up by 2 games and you may have another game or 2 without your franchise quarterback does not put you in a very good position. This team is seeing their season slip away before their very eyes.
Chase Bryce has been in the CFL for how many years, fellas?
This is year 4.
Can you imagine if a U Sports quarterback, heaven forbid, with a similar skill set, got 3 years to prepare and then looked like that? People would be running him out of the Canadian Football League. Chase Bryce looked awful against the Edmonton Elks and somehow was still in that game after Nathan Rourke got hurt. He looked a little bit better, didn't throw 4 interceptions against Toronto. But that Argonauts defense, as Hodge has pointed out on a yards per play basis, is not good. You've been in the Canadian Football League for 3 years, and you get your first opportunity to start, and it looks like that. I don't think Chase Bryce is going to be in the CFL much longer if he keeps playing ball like that. Now, we have seen people bounce back. There's a legitimate quarterback debate here between Caden Salter and Chase Bryce if Nathan Rourke, as JC alluded to, doesn't try to push himself back onto the field. is probably eating him up inside to sit there and watch that sorry excuse for an offensive performance against Toronto. Again, an Argonauts defense that has been taken advantage of by teams in the Canadian Football League so far in 2026. But I did have somebody tell me in training camp that they thought Salter had some legitimate skills. But it's one thing to say that and another for that upside to actually be realized on the field. Very small sample size. JC, I think you would agree. When Salter got on the field, it actually seemed like the Lions offense had some energy, did it not?
It really did. They were sparked immediately, and they almost scored there at the end of the game. Justin McInnes held up just 1 yard short of the goal line. Now, there was some plays where he missed receivers by a mile. There were some moments where I thought he looked like a bit of a deer in the headlights, but there were also some plays that only he can make. And that's the player we saw at Liberty when he was the Conference USA MVP, and didn't necessarily see as much when he transferred to Colorado. I think you're hoping to rediscover that type of dynamic dual threat pivot that he can be in the CFL. I don't think he's ready yet, but why not give him a game or two to test the waters and develop and get the teach tape that he needs to get better? Because I truly am of the belief that he could be a legitimate CFL quarterback in 2 or 3 years.
Comparison that was made to me, to your point about being dual threat, was a young Vernon Adams Jr. Now, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Salter has a long way to go to get to Vernon Adams Jr.'s level. And then when you get there, there's people that will say, well, VA hasn't even been to a Grey Cup yet, so he needs to prove that. But I notice that energy. It just seems so palpable coming through the television screen. That's why I wanted to confirm it with you being in the building. There was such a difference. It seemed like when Salter came into that game, the BC Lions on offense were like, okay, we believe we can move the football. And for whatever reason, and I have nothing against Chase Bryce, it didn't seem that way when he was in the football game in either of them, when he came in Edmonton or when he started that game. Now, one start does not a career make, and I think there's a chance, as we've seen in the past, where quarterbacks can bounce back from that. But if you're Buck Pierce and the coaching staff in the front office, albeit, again, a limited sample size, and you're looking at that tape, it's like, yeesh. Salter looks like he's got some snap in that arm. He has that dual threat ability. It is young in his career, but if you're up against it, I think even at this point in time, Salter gives you the best opportunity to win if Nathan Rourke can't play.
Caden Salter needs to start this week, in my opinion. I was kind of hoping that the Bryce was right because I wanted to make that pun. But
the Bryce was wrong.
The Bryce
Bob.
was wrong. The Bryce was wrong. It was wrong over and over and over again.
You know what I'm referencing, right?
Yeah, there's a Happy Gilmore reference, right?
Just making sure you caught it.
Yes, of course. No, I'm a child of the 90s, absolutely. R.I.P. Bob Barker. Man raised me Tuesdays when I was sick at 10 o'clock in the morning. But getting back to the Lions and the original question.
I remember eating cornflakes on the farm.
Cornflakes?
After we milked the cows. Yeah, it was like this ritual we had. And we would get all our chores done in time so that we could go in and watch The Price is Right. Sorry, I digress.
The Price is off. And since we're completely off track anyway, my wife recently found on our Samsung television, there's a free streaming service, Samsung TV Plus, and she recently found a channel that's just vintage episodes of The Price is Right from the 70s. And so we watched some a few weeks ago.
From the 70s?
From the 70s, like OG, like back when Bob Barker's hair was jet black. And it is so fun seeing some of the ridiculous outfits people are wearing. It's also so fun to be like, all right, it's a dishwasher. What do you think it costs? And they're like $7. And they're like, oh, no, it's only $5. That's way too many dollars. And they're like, oh, no. It's like, wow, everything was so cheap. But anyway.
JC's like, what are you dinosaurs talking about?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the show? Ever?
Aware of its existence, I have never seen it.
There, that was the question.
That's
good,
fair.
You answered it.
But anyway, getting back to football, Look, this is a must-win game for the BC Lions, and I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that. They play on a short week in Winnipeg on Thursday night. Evidently, Princess Auto Stadium is no longer a tough place to play. The Bombers are 1-3 at home this year. And
But wait, they have a road win at the same stadium.
Which, by the way, is nonsense. They sold out 16 straight games, almost sold out a game, and then they sold out again, and the team is posting stuff about how they've sold out 17 straight home games. It's like, you literally advertised this in the offseason as an extra home game. It was included in season ticket packages. But
it's a road game in the standings, Hodge.
Still going. Well, and here's the other part of it. I put this in my post-game column. It's like some teams, right, their attendance figures are awful, and it's going badly, and things are off the rails. And so if you're ever going to just lie to your fans, at least lie because you stink. Like, selling out 16 straight games, almost selling out a game, and then selling out again is an amazing accomplishment. Nobody else in the CFL is selling out jack right now. And attendance in Regina is the only place that's even somewhat comparable to Winnipeg. So, like, my point is there's no reason to lie or exaggerate about something you're doing really well, which is why I'm criticizing it. Like, it's kind of like somebody who's worth $100 million being like, actually, I'm worth 102. It's like, it doesn't matter at that point. You have more money than you could ever spend. Like, so anyway. But the BC Lions only play the Bombers twice this season. And based on how this past week went, I think if you're looking to catch a West Division team to get that playoff spot, it's the Blue Bombers. And if you only play them twice, you can't go into Winnipeg this week and lose. At that point, you're down 8 points in the standings. And unless you win by a greater margin later this year, you've lost the season series. And by the way, the last meeting between these two teams is week 21. It's the last game of the year. So you didn't even have a chance to like get the tiebreaker mid-season or something like that. Like, it has to go to the last game of the year, by which point you might as well already be out. So we don't know the timeline for Nathan Rourke's return. JC, you were told by the team a week ago that it was going to be weeks, not months. Does that mean he's back a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now? We don't know. We just know it's not a super long-term injury, assuming, of course, that timeline is accurate. But this is about as much of a must-win game as I've ever seen, and this early in the season. And the fact that it's going to come down to Caden Salter is not fair to Caden Salter. But I think if you play Chase Bryce again, the writing is probably on the wall. You're not going to win that football game. So to me, you go with Chase Bryce out of desperation, and you hope that your Hail Mary is answered.
You mean go with Caden Salter out of desperation?
Oh, that's what I meant to say. If I didn't say that, I misspoke.
There's one more element I do want to discuss here, because you brought it up in the question, and then we got sidetracked by Bob Barker and Winnipeg's attendance. But Dijon Allen being released by the BC Lions was a bit of a head scratcher to me. And that has come under increased scrutiny because his replacement, Josh Donovan, on the second series of the game goes down with what appeared to be a serious lower body injury. Now, we don't have an update on Josh Donovan's status, but certainly when somebody has to be carted off the field like he was in that sort of circumstance, you fear the worst. And you have to ask why the BC Lions decided to release a guy who was a former most outstanding offensive lineman, and 2 years ago they acquired via trade with the express purpose of trying to fix their offensive line. And the Lions say this was a performance-based decision. I tend to agree with them that Dijon Allen wasn't as good as I expected him to be in a Lions uniform. Part of that was injuries last year. This year he's been healthy, but I still thought he had shown some cracks at times. But if you dig into the advanced numbers, whether you believe them or not from, Pro Football Focus, Dijon Allen had the second highest grade of any offensive lineman in the CFL going into last week. And on the Lions, his 9 pressures allowed as a right tackle was 4th on the team. Corey Woodruff, Chris Slugger, and Michael Couture all had allowed more pressures than DeJohn Allen. He was also their most effective run blocker, according to the PFF advanced metrics. So even if you think he didn't live up to expectations and maybe he was a little bit overpaid, what you've done is released your top offensive lineman, according to those statistics. And again, take PFF stuff with a grain of salt. You absolutely should. But I think this offensive line is worse off right now without DeJohn Allen. And they've got a couple guys in the pipeline with experience. I'm a big fan of Josh Coker's game from his time in Calgary. Isaiah Cage has experience from his time in Toronto. But both of those guys are coming off serious injuries, and I think they're still weeks away from returning. This was a suspect move when it happened. And now that Donovan has gone down, I think it becomes a really, really curious one.
You always bring him back.
Does he
Unless
want to
somebody
come
else
back?
picks him up.
I'm just saying, it's a possibility. Yeah, nobody else has picked him up yet.
It's absolutely a possibility, but if I'm DeJohn Allen and the BC Lions want me back, I'm saying, hey, how about you give me $200,000 right now up front? Like, if you're going to be
Or the
that
Lions could
desperate
say,
after
hey,
cutting me.
Has anybody else called you and even offered you a contract? This is all speculation anyways. I get it. But if nobody else has offered him a contract, does he want to play football or not? He can't really name his price.
I think there are situations around the league where if DeJohn Allen plays his cards right and he is patient, that he will get an opportunity and there will be other chances. I don't know that you want to go back to an organization that just told you you're not good enough.
Fair.
Worked for Dwayne Hendricks.
Chase Bryce, go ahead, Hodge.
It worked for Dwayne Hendricks in Toronto. He's on the active roster after getting cut.
That's true.
If Chase Bryce starts, I will not watch this game. If Caden Salter starts, I will watch this game. Let's go, JC. Enough BC Lions talk. Move on.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders narrowly fell to the Edmonton Elks on Thursday night after Vincent Blanchard boogered a 57-yard walk-off field goal to secure the win. However, minutes earlier, a 21-yard touchdown pass to Samuel Emilus was nullified by an offensive pass interference penalty that has since left Rider Nation feeling angry. Dunk, should the flag have been thrown, and did it cost Saskatchewan the game?
No, the flag should not have been thrown. And if you look at how this game was officiated from start to finish, there was a physicality, especially in pass coverage. Cordell Jackson was battling other receivers. Keon Schaefer-Baker roasted him a couple times at least. And I think on this play, it was some simple hand fighting. There was no blatant full arm push off. Wasn't even really a chicken wing. I think it was just some hand fighting. You guys can weigh in here when I'm done. But no, I don't think this flag should have been thrown. And it absolutely changed the complexion of the game because, as you mentioned, that Blanchard 57-yard field goal would not have won Edmonton the football game. The Elks would have had to drive all the way down, hypothetically, if that touchdown to Emilus had stood, to get their own touchdown to win the game. So I absolutely think it changed the game. It didn't help also that global kicker Alex Hale, let's call it what it is, shanked a 46-yard field goal try wide left, which completely nullified an unbelievable decision that Cody Fajardo escapes from, where Mark Cordy snaps the ball early. Fajardo's not ready for it, but it seems like he was trying to pitch it to Justin Rankin, but just barfed it up into no man's land. And then Antoine Brooks Jr. almost took it all the way for a touchdown. That call and the Hale missed kick meant no points came off that Fajardo gaff. That was absolutely atrocious. Now, on the other hand, Fajardo was great throwing the football forward during the game for over 500 yards. I believe he was the first quarterback since Ricky Ray in 2017 to throw for 500 or more yards in a Canadian Football League game. He absolutely filleted the Saskatchewan Roughriders defense thanks to a couple coverage busts Austin Mack, the recipient of those on long touchdown catches. But let's not get it twisted. That Samuel Emilus offensive pass interference completely changed this game and fell as possibly the balance of power in the West as it relates to Edmonton and Saskatchewan battling for that number one seed. It's only a 1 point difference in terms of the tiebreaker. The two teams play again in week 9. That game will go a long way towards determining who might be the number one seed in the West Division, but that call against Emilus never should have been made.
I agree. It should not have been a penalty. I think as a general rule, you should always let the players make the decisions of how the game is going to go. And your job is to penalize egregious infractions, right? Every punt return touchdown, if you look hard enough, you'll find a hold. Well, nobody wants to pay their hard-earned money to go watch the officials negate big plays, right? And the same is true on pretty much every offensive play, right? Someone's going to hold, some defender is going to have illegal contact. And if it's borderline, as long as it's not meaningfully changing the play, you don't call it. And I didn't think that Samuel Emilus did anything on this play to meaningfully change anything. And I felt personally robbed because I not only have Sam Emilus in fantasy, but I also had Trevor Harris as my QB. So I got double banged on this play.
Hodge, we've said this before, bruh. People don't care about your fantasy team. People don't care about your fantasy team.
If it didn't bother you guys, I wouldn't do it. But the fact that it gets a rise out of you, I'm going to keep doing it. I think the people like the joke. The last time I asked them, multiple people were like, yeah, I'm loving this gag where Hodge gets it with the fantasy team. So regardless, I will answer the second half of this question, which is I don't think it cost Sask the game, right? There's adversity in every game. There's bad calls that can affect both teams. And yes, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I think, were unfairly penalized on this play. Well, what happens on the next one? Well, Trevor Harris takes a sack. Okay, well, that makes the field goal longer. And then maybe the greatest rivalry in the CFL right now is the Saskatchewan Roughriders versus having a competent kicker. Like Alex Hale did not have the goods earlier this year. Sorry to say it. I'm sure he's a nice guy. But that 46-yard attempt was pathetic. And this is a team that had Jonathan Kim in camp. Kim looked good. Lewis Ward at this time last week was sitting at home, not doing anything. Like, there are several options, either on a potential basis or on like a proven track record, I'm a veteran basis, who could have come into Saskatchewan and solidified that spot. The Riders said no. Corey Mace gave Alex Hale a vote of confidence. And I think Corey Mace is a fantastic head coach, but I'm sorry, this individual does not deserve a vote of confidence right now. If anything, just put him on the PR and bring in a veteran who can help him and just right the ship. Because right now, this is a really talented football team with by far the worst kicking in the CFL. And it almost cost the Riders in the Grey Cup last year. And full credit to Brett Lothar, who's having a brilliant bounce back season with the Ottawa Red Blacks. But like, this team was smart to move on. The issue is they didn't move on to something better. So I have questions about that. Like Cody Fajardo is hitting the uprights in Regina more than Alex Hale. Like, that's it. It blows my mind. So, and then obviously you got to give credit to Vincent Blanchard. I did not think he was going to make that kick. I'll be perfectly frank. And the fact that he not only made the 57-yarder, but made it enough, like our guy Andrew Hoskins was in the bowels of the stadium postgame, and he overheard a conversation between CFL officials talking about how far they thought that kick would have been good from. There were people saying it would have been good from 68, 69, even 70 yards. Like, I did not realize Vincent Blanchard had that in his game. So my apologies to the Laval product. That was an unbelievable play. This was the best game of the season outside of the bad call. I don't want to make this game all about the bad call because I think CFL officials generally do a good job. I thought the Riders were excellent in this one. I thought Cody Fajardo was excellent in this one. The Elks were, and the Elks are a true 6-1 football team. This is not a team that has gotten lucky bounces here and there along the way. Like, they are a legitimate first place team. And I'm really, really excited to see what the crowd could be at Commonwealth Stadium. Yes, it'll be buoyed by a ton of Rider fans, but even so, could we get 30,000, 35,000 in the building? That would be amazing at Commonwealth Stadium. So I'm all here for the hype, but as much as it was a bad call, I don't think it killed the game for the Riders.
I'll keep it brief on the penalty because I think you guys have mostly covered it. I thought it was a soft call as well. I think part of the reason why it was potentially made is as he was making his break to the corner, Sam Emilus's arm sort of gets up in behind and onto the helmet of the defender. And I think when the ref sees that, that potentially makes them more likely to throw the flag in that scenario, though I don't think the contact was actually significant or really contributed to him separating on that route. So it was a bad call. Bad calls happen in football games, and you have to be able to bounce back from them. The Riders didn't, right? Trevor Harris takes a sack on the next play. Alex Hale shanks a field goal, and then they get another golden opportunity to score a goal-ahead touchdown. And I think we need to say it like it is. Trevor Harris just misses the throw, and I think he would admit that as well. He did after the game. It's one that's going to haunt him. He should have had Johnny Johnson III in the end zone, and he just put too much touch on it, and he underthrew him, and you just can't make that type of mistake in clutch time. That's the reason why the Saskatchewan Roughriders lost this football game, because they had multiple opportunities at the end where the Edmonton Elks gave them golden chances to win the football game, and they couldn't deliver. It's the confluence of all those events that contribute to the loss. And Dunk, as I throw it over to you, you were sitting here scoffing about the Edmonton Elks as a legitimate team last week, pointing out some of the ways in which they'd won those football games. I think the thread remains true against the Riders, but they've beaten the defending Grey Cup champions this time around, and now they are alone in first place at 6-1. Are you a believer in the green and gold now?
Edmonton are legit. I don't want to necessarily go as far to say as I'm a believer in them winning the Grey Cup. I certainly think it's possible. But as Hodge alluded to, and to your point, JC, Edmonton is full value for their 6-1 record and to be first place in the West Division. This team clearly ain't messing around, and to go in and win a game like that with the ups and the downs and the momentum swings at Mosaic Stadium, to me, proved that, okay, the Edmonton Elks in 2026, at least through 7 games, look like legitimate Grey Cup contenders. And I want to correct myself from earlier, because I think I said it was a 1-point game. That's my error. It was a 2-point game. 36-34 was the final. So Saskatchewan, to win the season series, needs to win by 3 or more in Edmonton. Of course, if Edmonton wins the football game, they'll hold the all-important season series, which might be a tiebreaker for first place in the West Division. But great point, JC. Make no mistake. Edmonton are legit CFL championship contenders. And really, if we want to lengthen the conversation a little bit, I know we want to get to our next topic, but for me, I see 3 teams competing for the Grey Cup, at least through this point in the season. That would be Edmonton and Saskatchewan and Montreal. It would be different if somehow the hand of God or whatever you believe in heals Bo Levi Mitchell and the Ticats are able to make it to the playoffs. Then I think the Ticats could be in the mix. That defense looks really good and did a great job shutting down Davis Alexander. But I think at this moment in time, curious if you guys agree, there are 3 teams legitimately competing for the Grey Cup, and obviously upsets in the playoffs can happen.
I think I would be tempted to add a 4th team to that mix, but I'll save that for the next segment.
I'm in the exact same boat as Hodge here. I think you've got the correct 3, but there's a dark horse 4th that we're about to discuss. So I won't ruin that segment.
And
wise words, JC.
Not to disrail, but some thought I just occurred to me. We talked last week about the Ottawa Red Blacks and their struggles. We started the show this week with the BC Lions and their struggles. Just think next year when it'll be like, man, if one of these 2 teams doesn't start winning soon, only one of them is going to make the playoffs. The other might miss. I'm not looking forward to that at all.
What a complete joke. Anyways,
Unbelievable.
We'll save that for 2027. Stampeders quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. has 20, count them, 20 touchdown passes, and you don't need to count these because there aren't any. 0 interceptions through 7 games. Unbelievable. Big play VA. He has set a new CFL record for most touchdown passes to start a season without a pick after an impressive win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Week 8. How high up the West Division standings can Calgary climb?
I'll say, I mean, I don't think it's out of the possibility for them to finish first. Like, I really don't. And I'm not saying I'm going to pick them to finish first, but to me, they are a legitimate Grey Cup contender right now. And there needs to be some level of improvement defensively, but I thought we finally saw the start of that this past week. Like, this is a team that came into week 8 at 2-4. JC and I both picked them to win and cover in Winnipeg. They did more than that. They won by 22 points. They dominated in all 3 phases. And when you look at this team's losses, they're all 1-score losses. And 2 of them are to the Montreal Alouettes, who have been beating the snot out of pretty much everybody so far. And then the other 2 are against Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. And like, the offense is the best in the league. Like, this team is on pace, I believe, to set a new CFL scoring record. So offensively, they are almost beyond reproach. Vernon Adams Jr. is a legitimate MOP candidate. I wrote that last week. I think after he was brilliant in week 8, and Tyson Philpott had a quiet week, Justin Rankin had a quiet week, Davis Alexander had a quiet week, you could even make the argument that he's the number 1 candidate, honestly. But you look at the fact that they run the ball really well. They do that. The receiving core, super balanced. Like, they have playmakers, but super balanced. They're not just relying on one target. The offensive line is doing a good job controlling the line of scrimmage. Generally, they struggled in pass pro a little bit this past week, but generally, they're a solid unit. Bakine Coley at right tackle just needs to settle in a little more. But the defensive line that a lot of people talked about before the season, I know we certainly did, as being the best in the league, has started to look like that as Jalen Hutchings has gotten healthy, gotten back into form. Falar Nurmalade has now been back for a month. He's getting back to his dominant form. And Clarence Hicks, if you haven't seen it already, with about 4 minutes left in the game on Friday night, put Stanley Bryant on his butt in a way I'm not sure I've seen in Stanley Bryant's 15 CFL seasons. So there's still things to clean up on the back end, but Ben LaBrosse, who has been on the bench, right, all year until finally getting a chance to start in week 8, goes out, gets 3 picks. Zy Alexander, who was not a starter to start the year, but has now become a starter, has been very good. Like, if this secondary can get together, I think this defense can start looking more like it did in 2025 rather than the way it's looked in 2026. And then, I mean, special teams wise, Mickey, their kicker, has been just as good as Rene Paredes. Mark Vassett's been solid, and Tyreek McAllister has been great in the return game. He obviously had I believe it was 118-yard missed field goal return for a touchdown. So the Stampeders are 3-4, right? That's not a good record. It's mediocre, but I think based on their schedule, they're a lot better than that record might indicate. And I think they've got a chance to really string some wins together here. Like, they've got the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who I think Justin was very smart to point out. Defensively, the Tiger Cats played super well the last 2 weeks, but offensively, they've been very, very challenged since Bo Levi Mitchell went down. Then they've got the Argonauts, and then they've got the Lions, and then they've got the Tabbies again. Like, in other words, the Stamps have a lot of their hardest games out of the way. Not to say anybody is an easy out in the CFL right now, but they have a bit of a softer schedule, and this team doesn't get a chance to even play Ottawa, who's been the worst team in the league to start the year, until the last third of the season. So I like the Calgary Stampeders right now, and I like the trajectory that they're on. And VA, yes, to me, is a legitimate MOP candidate, arguably the front runner.
I'm in complete alignment with you, Hodge, and this was the dark horse team that I was alluding to at the end of the last segment. As a complete aside, that play between Clarence Hicks and Stanley Bryant, to me, was reminiscent of a play a few years ago where I believe it was Dedrick Mills ran over Adam Bighill. And to me, when I think about the end of Adam Bighill's Hall of Fame CFL career, I think about that play being the moment where I realized he wasn't the same player he had been anymore, and that it was all downhill from there. Stanley Bryant getting bowled over by speed rusher Clarence Hicks, to me, feels like that same play for him and his Hall of Fame career. Not that he's not going to continue playing or that he can't be functional, but it's clear that he's not the same guy that he once was. Now, the Calgary defensive line across the board is fantastic. And when I picked the Stamps as a potential regression team before the season, it was mostly based on the belief that that defensive line wasn't going to be as good. Jalen Hutchings had yet to sign with the team at that point, and we didn't know when Folarin Orimolade was going to be back or what he was going to look like. Turns out, doesn't matter if he's torn up his Achilles. Like, he looks superhuman. He's up there in the top 10 of pressures, and he missed several games to start the season. He's been unbelievable. Clarence Hicks, I think, is a most outstanding defensive player candidate at this stage of the year. And Hutchings has quietly built up, and I thought against against Winnipeg, played his best game of the season and showed us he's still the game wrecker that he was last season. The secondary has been a problem. They need to get better there. I think they're starting to trend in that direction, but the defensive line makes them capable of beating any team. And Vernon Adams Jr. is playing otherworldly offensively with a number of weapons who are stepping up for him. I don't necessarily think that they would win the majority of matchups against a team like Montreal or Edmonton or Saskatchewan. I think we've seen that because Montreal beat them twice in a row. But this is a team that, once they get into the playoffs, if they're fully healthy, I think on any given game day can steal one. And I think they could go on a run at the right time and make themselves into a legitimate contender.
You know who probably enjoyed watching this Calgary-Winnipeg game the most? Ryan Dinwiddie, saying everybody who was all over the Red Blacks about trading Drew Brown to Winnipeg and comments about his arm strength. Well, look at him now. 24 of 40, 249 yards, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions. 4. Drew Brown did not look good in this football game. We talked about it after the game between Ottawa and Winnipeg in the nation's capital, that Drew Brown did not look good. So I'm curious to see if he can bounce back from that performance. But I think it needs to be said, because it seemed like everybody, including TSN, was clowning on the Ottawa Redblacks for trading Drew Brown away. And for 2 straight weeks, he has not played even decent football for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, in my opinion. Yes, there was a comeback win in there, but he did not look great in that football game. And if Ottawa makes one of those interceptions that he threw right into the hands of multiple defensive backs, I think we're talking about Winnipeg in a much different light here, fellas. But on the flip side, this game shows Calgary's potential, and I do think Vernon Adams Jr. needs to be talked about in the most outstanding player conversation. The reason he's not at the top of most people's lists is because of the record. When you look at Edmonton and Montreal, and even to a lesser degree Saskatchewan, you can look at their quarterbacks and make an argument for it because they have winning or dominant records in the case of Montreal and Edmonton, and we know Saskatchewan is right there. So I think you can make a legitimate argument at this point in the season for Trevor Harris. I think in Montreal, naturally, you would look at Davis Alexander, but Tyson Philpott still continues to lead the Canadian Football League in receiving yards at over 807 games and has 7 receiving touchdowns. And oh, by the way, he's Canadian. I think you have to talk about Justin Rankin and Cody Fajardo in Edmonton. But in Calgary, all respect to Dedrick Mills, who's leading the Canadian Football League in rushing in a somewhat quiet way because there's so much hype about Rankin, and rightfully so. Vernon Adams Jr. deserves to be squarely in that conversation. 20 touchdowns and no interceptions in 7 games. Like, out of this world kind of stuff. Unbelievable. And for as much as And JC, you've been among them when he was in BC. We have criticized Vernon Adams Jr. He told 3DownNation leading into the season that he really wanted to focus on being more consistent, but most importantly for Vernon Adams Jr., he wanted to put that together through a full season and finish strong. So a hot start for Vernon Adams Jr. is not new. We have seen this before. What Vernon Adams Jr. needs to do is turn this into 40 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Do I think that's going to happen? Likely not. I'm exaggerating a little bit here. But he needs to be consistent in the back part of the season and know the season doesn't just start on Labor Day weekend. And if he is, then I think, yes, perhaps the Calgary Stampeders can be a dark horse Grey Cup contender. But Calgary first needs to leapfrog Winnipeg in the standings and get in the playoffs. I think it's very clear right now, fellas, to go the other way with this discussion. If you look at, okay, who are the 3 likely teams to miss the playoffs after 8 weeks in the Canadian Football League? Obviously, people are going to say Ottawa and BC. And the third one, you could argue, is going to be a bit of a toss-up. But more and more, it looks like Winnipeg, and we had the article on the site, Brady Oliveira's wondering what their offensive identity is. If we're talking about this again for the second straight year in Winnipeg, because this became the chatter when Jason Hogan was the offensive coordinator, and now Oliveira has spoken out on Tommy Condell as the offensive coordinator. What does this mean for the Bombers, Hodge?
I mean, the Bombers are, they had a brilliant opportunity on Friday to really take a stranglehold in their spot in the West Division. Like, the Riders lose Thursday night. You're hosting the Stampeders Friday night. The Bombers won the first matchup against Calgary. If you win that game, you not only put 6 points between yourself and the Stamps, you also win the season series. Instead, the season series is now still up for grabs, and the Stampeders are breathing down your neck. And I think this team will get at least a little better when Zach Collaros returns to health. But I mean, I don't think losing Jarrell Broxton, by far and away your number one offensive lineman, that can be understated. When I was in the locker room postgame, Broxton had his right knee wrapped in ice. Take that for what it's worth. But I mean, defensively, this team has really struggled. Despite significantly improved D-line play from Willie Jefferson, who's having a great renaissance season, Jake Serezna, who I think has been great. We saw some flashes from Newer Gatkuth, their first round pick in the 2026 CFL draft. The back end has been a disaster, and that's kind of shocking considering that the secondary has been very good for years, despite not having an elite pass rush in front of it. So it was a 3-phase loss. I don't really have any concerns about Winnipeg's special teams. Yeah, they got beat by Calgary, but they are still the number one unit statistically in the league. For me, the concern is offense and defense. This team just needs to shut up and run the ball, and they seem to refuse to do that. And defensively, the breakdowns and the unbelievably sloppy tackling on the back end is almost unforgivable. So I do still have the Bombers making the playoffs, but you know, with the way Drew Brown won his first start, you kind of go, okay, this might be a team that can compete for first place in the West Division. Right now, I don't have them there. I have them as basically what they did last year, a crossover team that goes in and has a first-round exit. So we'll see if they're able to elevate themselves from that, or maybe they'll even fall short of that, missing out on the playoffs.
Prior to leaving the segment, fellas, we should mention Tyreek McAllister, according to TSN, becoming the first player in CFL history to record 3 different types of touchdowns in a single half. That was similar to Vernon Adams Jr. in his 20 TDs to 0 interceptions, was unbelievable.
Lions owner Amar Doman wants to be Doman with the purchase of BC Place Stadium. JC, do you actually think that he could succeed in buying the facility?
Well, just to clarify things for people who may have been confused by Hodge's absolutely horrific pun, Amar Doman has expressed his official interest in purchasing BC Place Stadium from the government of British Columbia. It's currently run by Pavco, which is a Crown corporation operating on behalf
answer the
of
question.
the BC provincial
If Amar
government.
Doman wants to buy BC Place Stadium, he will buy BC Place Stadium. Can you just answer the question?
I don't think it's as simple as that, Dunk. I don't believe that the likeliest
Yes,
scenario
come
is
on.
that he will buy BC Place Stadium. Because it's a government asset, if it was to be sold, there would have to be a public bidding process that has not begun at this stage. This can't be executed in some sort of side deal. Now, Amar Doman has very, very deep pockets. Don't get me wrong. And he's got friends in very high places in the BC government who no doubt would like to see him succeed. But if it became an open bidding process, you would get other interested parties, I'm sure, besides the two that we know about. And that's how this story comes about, is the Vancouver Whitecaps, the MLS franchise that is currently trying to negotiate with various levels of government to stay in Vancouver, have also expressed their interest in buying the stadium. And on the same day that news leaked that Doman was interested, the Post Media had an interview with a BC government minister who said the government would be open to selling the stadium to the Whitecaps in the right circumstances. Now, the Lions have been clear that Doman's interest predates this story by several years. It's not related to the Whitecaps, but we would be naive to think that these two things are not connected and that this story came out just coincidentally on the same day. What's happening here, in my opinion, is the Lions have been passively watching the Whitecaps situation, leveraging it in order to get a better setup at BC Place for themselves. And now that there's the potential for something to happen with the stadium that would give the Whitecaps full control, Amar Doman is exerting his power, standing up and saying, hey, you're not doing this without us being involved. I think it's unlikely that the province would want to side with one sporting team over the other. More likely, some sort of management deal that sees them as partners comes out of this, and that the stadium will remain under the ownership of the government, but managed for game day revenue's sake for these two sporting franchises. I think that's the likeliest scenario, not an outright purchase. Does that answer the question, Dunk?
Yes, my statement stands. If Amar Doman wants to buy BC Place, he will find a way to buy BC Place, be it in tandem or him on his own. That just seems to be how Amar Doman.
Well, I think the other element of this here is I've gotten a lot of pushback from Vancouver Whitecaps fans since this article dropped, saying, well, how dare you present a scenario in which the
Pushback from
Whitecaps...
soccer fans? No.
I know. Shocking, isn't it? Saying the Lions are a lesser franchise, the Whitecaps are the second professional team in this market behind the Vancouver Canucks. They have a much better product, higher revenues, therefore they should have full control of the stadium and the Lions should just be a tenant and Amar Doman should go away. Now, I think that is among the most ridiculous takes that I have ever heard. And yes, the Whitecaps have more revenue overall than the BC Lions, but they also, by their own admission, lost $45 million last season in a year in which they went to the MLS championship game. They've apparently lost more than $200 million overall over the last 10 years. They're begging and pleading and threatening multiple levels of government in order to get them a circumstance where they can actually make money. The BC Lions
play way more home games.
Absolutely. And the Lions average higher attendance overall. Yes, smaller sample size of games, but that remains a fact. And they're a bigger draw on television. That's just the reality. Now, we don't know the exact details of what the viewership is for MLS games because of their deal with Apple TV. But I have yet to speak to a single person in the know who has not described that broadcast deal as an absolute disaster for the MLS. And the reality is, as much as people want to clown on the CFL for teams not making money and this and that, half of MLS teams lose money. And there was an article in ESPN just the other day in which one investment analyst who's involved in sports and consults with people who are looking to make purchases in that field. And he said that the MLS is the single worst investment in all of sports. And he tells people to stay away from it entirely. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is a house of cards. And it is currently propped up by a 40-year-old Argentinian who is not going to be around very much longer. The Lions should play second fiddle to nobody. They do their business properly. They're invested in this community. They have handled things at an extremely high level. And just because they're not out there beating their chests and threatening governments does not mean that they don't deserve a seat at the table. They absolutely should have one, and they should have an equal share.
I think any soccer fans who are upset with 3Down should respond by falling over and pretending they've been shot when someone blows on their ankle.
Yes, I think you can all tell that I'm not a soccer fan. Now, I don't actually want the Whitecaps to relocate. For the sake of all sports fans, I want a city in which everyone can thrive and where everyone has a place they can go and cheer. But that's got to be reciprocal. And I was rubbed the wrong way by a lot of the responses, specifically from soccer fans. I don't want to say CFL fans are without sin, but I haven't seen the same animosity returned back to any of the Whitecaps comments and their situation. Generally only sympathy. I did not get that in the comments when this news broke from fans of the MLS.
Enough flailing around the field and talking about soccer fans. Let's stick to football. Keep it moving here, JC.
Hamilton Tiger Cats quarterback Tre Ford came down to earth in his second start for the team, completing 15 of 23 passes for 164 yards, a touchdown, and a game-ending interception. What did you make of his performance?
It was decent until that interception late in the fourth quarter where Hamilton was down, I believe it was 6, and the Tiger Cats had a chance to drive for potential game-tying touchdown and possible game-winning extra point. What stood out to me was Tre Ford, who's going to have to go through this process again in a new offense, going to have to prove that he can be a consistent week in and week out starter. And Noel Thorpe, the Montreal Alouettes defensive coordinator, cranked up the pressure on him. That's sort of what happened on the last play. And then Ford floats it. It looked like he was trying to throw it to Myron Mitchell, number 7 for the Ticats, way over his head. And then Robert Kennedy makes an easy interception. It looked like Ford was really throwing it directly to Kennedy. I don't think that was actually the case, but it came off that way. So I think, was it great? Certainly not. Was it awful? I don't think so, because Montreal is a tough place to play in, and that defense was flying around again. I don't think we've seen that Alouettes defense play like that for a little while. So let's see how he responds. But I'll say overall, it was decent.
I think that's giving Tre Ford too much credit. Look, the Montreal Alouettes have been on an unbelievable pace to start this year. Like, Tyson Philpott was out here on pace for 2,600 yards, right? Davis Alexander is out here looking like Doug Flutie. Well, the Tiger Cats defense went into Percival Molson Stadium, where they actually had a pretty darn good crowd for a Sunday night. And they gave up 6.1 yards per play. They got 3 takeaways. And on special teams, the Ticats got a touchdown from Isaiah Wooden Sr. on an incredible return. And they lost the game. And that is such an indictment of this Tiger Cats offense. And I'm not saying Tre Ford is solely responsible for the offense, but they put up 228 yards in the game, right? Like, you could make a good argument that the Tiger Cats had the better defense in this game. The Tiger Cats had the better special teams in this game. And yet they lost by 13 points. And that has to fall on the offense. And the quarterback is always going to take more blame than they deserve when things are bad. And they're always going to get more credit than they deserve when things are good. And for Tre Ford to go 15 of 23 for a $164, a touchdown and a pick, it's just not good enough. And this is a quarterback who got a win in his first start, but the Tiger Cats wouldn't have won that game if Liram Hajrullahu hadn't missed a 31-yard, like a chip shot field goal to win it late. So I appreciate that this was never the plan in Hamilton. Scott Milanovich has made it very clear. The plan was to have a full year where Tre would just learn behind Bo Levi Mitchell and develop and grow. And obviously Bo has had a renaissance in Hamilton, very impressively so, back-to-back East Division Most Outstanding Player candidate. So Tre was not supposed to be playing right now, but what we've seen so far from Tre, in my opinion, is not an elevation from where he was at Edmonton. It's more the same. It's not to say he's a bad player. When he's at his best, he's one of the most fun players to watch in the league, but you're just not going to win that many games in this league when you barely manage 150 passing yards and you throw a pick on the most important drive of the game.
I don't want to bash Tre Ford too much here. I thought his performance for the most part was not awful. It was passable. It wasn't good enough, but it was okay. It wasn't the worst quarterback performance of the week, but you live by Tre Ford like you did last week, or you die by Tre Ford. And the reality is that interception at the end of the game was the worst interception I've seen by a quarterback this season, combining both the inaccuracy of the pass, which went directly to the Alouettes defender, Robert Kennedy III, but also the moment. The Hamilton Tiger Cats very well could have won that football game and upset Montreal had he not thrown an absolute duck at a moment when he didn't have to do it. He was trying to make a play. He was wrapped up by a defender and he panicked. We've seen it time and time again throughout his career. That was an indefensible decision by Tre Ford, and I can only imagine the conversations between him and the interception-averse Scott Milanovich this week in practice and in film. I'd pay to be a fly on the wall in some of those meetings.
I don't necessarily know if he panicked. It was a bad interception, yes, but he's also trying to make a play. Like, I don't think we can say, okay, terrible interception. He's panicking. He's stepping up in the pocket and trying to make a play. Was it an awful pass? Yes. Did it seem like it was intended for possibly Myron Mitchell? I think it's fair to say that, but I don't think we can say he panicked on the play and just barfed the ball up.
I think we can. I mean, if we're going to talk about
you can
players,
I won't say that.
Well, I will absolutely say. I mean, I forget who it was you said was barfing the ball up earlier in the podcast, but this was
Cody Fajardo.
Very much. Yes, yeah, he barfed the ball up. I thought this was as bad as Cody Fajardo barfing the ball up.
This was as bad. That Cody Fajardo play was way worse. Way worse.
That at least
he
had
flips
other
the
people
ball
making
into
mistakes.
no man's land. Tre Ford is stepping up in the pocket under duress and appears to be targeting Myron Mitchell. Was it a bad pass? Yes. Have we ever seen anything like what Cody Fajardo did?
In my opinion, there was at least mitigating factors when it came to Fajardo. A bad snap, a circumstance where the running back wasn't where he was supposed to be. Yes, it was a horrible, awful, indefensible play, but there's no mitigating factors to me.
Which play was worse?
It lost his team the game. It's
we
Tre
agree
Ford's.
to disagree.
For the record,
Fajardo's could have lost his team the game.
The official worst play of the week, according to our publication, is the Tre Ford interception. So we have literally, as a website, made that decision. But
3DownNation is wrong for once.
It's now time for JC's random neg lister, and you guys know that I'm a big believer in names determining outcomes. So when this guy came across the transaction wire or the neg list wire, I should say, for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I immediately knew he was going to be a future star in green and white. That's quarterback Eddie Lee Marburger from University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Have you ever heard a quarterback name that was more fitting of prairie football than Eddie Lee Marburger. And this guy is legitimate. He's only a one-year starter because he transferred to Texas Rio Grande Valley for their first and thus far only season of Division I football, and immediately led them to a 9-3 record in the Southland Conference, was named the Southland Conference's Offensive Player of the Year after throwing for 2,700 yards, 31 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions. He's not a particularly athletic guy, but he's a battler, and he also ran for 308 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground. I love the way he plays the game. I love the vibe of the name, and he's a free agent right now. I want him coming in and battling with Braden Shager to be the future of the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 2027.
Let's go to Hodge's heritage moment. On this day in 2007, Milt Stegall became the CFL's all-time touchdowns leader after catching a 1-yard pass from Kevin Glenn. The Canadian Football Hall of Famer would eventually retire with 147 scores, 144 by reception, 1 by rush, 1 by punt return, and 1 by fumble recovery. That record still stands today. And the more time that goes by, honestly, guys, the more I think this record's never going to get beaten. And I've taken the liberty of piecing together some numbers from recent stars in this league, just for context. G. Roy Simon, 103. Sensational number, but 44 fewer than Stegall. Andrew Harris retired with 83. A lot, but barely half of Stegall. Nick Lewis, 73. That is, in fact, less than Stegall. Weston Dressler, 65. S.J. Green, 60. These guys are both in the Hall of Fame. Well, guess what? Combined, fewer touchdowns than Milt Stegall. Actually, is Green in the Hall of Fame? I might be confusing with Jamal Richardson. I digress. Emmanuel Arsenault, 58. Darius Bowman, 49. Milt Stegall caught or scored 3 times the touchdowns of Darius Bowman. That is genuinely insane. I don't think this record will be broken.
Let's go to the 3-minute drill. The Ottawa Redblacks have brought back national place kicker Lewis Ward after he was cut and then went to Montreal, returns to the nation's capital. Is that a smart move?
Well, Brett Lothar is reportedly battling injury, so I like this move for Ottawa. Louis is still a fan favorite in the nation's capital. The Edmonton Elks head coach Mark Killam dedicated his team's Week 8 win over Saskatchewan to the CFL's schedule makers. What did you make of that, JC?
I loved it. Now, I don't agree with Killam that the Elks have somehow been unfairly targeted by the schedule makers, but clearly he's got his team rallying around the idea that they've been counted out and disrespected, and it's working in the way they're performing on the field. This is why I thought Mark Killam would be a great head coach, and thus far, he is proving it. Dunk, you reported that the BC Lions signed former CFL award winner Lorenzo Mauldin IV on Monday. Wait, wasn't he retired?
He was, man, but money talks, and it gets, a lot of people, including Mauldin, heck, even Hodge, up off the couch. The CFL has assessed a 3rd fine against Ottawa Redblacks defensive lineman Habakkuk Baldonado, dating back to Ottawa's Week 6 game against Edmonton. Are all 3 deserved?
I don't know what this particular fine is for, so I have a hard time answering the question. That said, being fined 3 times from the same game, at some point, aren't you in the negative? Like, aren't the fines not only taking up all your game check, but possibly more? Like, Baldonado, you got to be more disciplined. Canadian tight end Tanner McLaughlin has signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Does that mean he'll never see the CFL?
I don't think that's true at all. I think his NFL career is hanging by a thread at this stage, and the Calgary Stampeders should be watching carefully what happens at the end of training camp. The Toronto Argonauts signed veteran defensive end Sean Lemon last week, and the move paid immediate dividends as he notched 2 sacks. Did that surprise you?
It did not. Whenever Sean Lemon gets the chance to be on a football field and rush the passer, he's proven throughout his lengthy career that he can get it done. And I think it should be noted that those 2 sacks put him up to 105 in his Canadian Football League career, tying who, fellas?
Joe Montford?
Nope. JC, what's your guess?
Charleston Hughes? No. That's
No,
too
sir.
high.
Rodney Harding, who's in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, as Lemon continues to climb that sack list. I believe he was 12th all time, so now he is tied for 11th, and with one more would move into 11th place solo on the all-time sacks list. Diego Pavia, the guy who Hodge loves to track and a star former NCAA quarterback out of Vanderbilt, was cut by the Baltimore Ravens last week. Do you think he'll sign with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who have him on their neg list, anytime soon?
I mean, only Pavia knows what he wants to do for now. If I'm him, I'm probably not looking at the CFL or the UFL until the NFL regular season gets underway. Camps are just in the process of opening up across the country, so I'm not rushing in anything. But look, I have been led to believe by a source that Pavia will consider the CFL if the NFL does not pan out. And since he's on Winnipeg's neg list, the Bombers are the only team he can go to. So certainly a story worth following. Former CFL player Spencer Moore pleaded guilty to intimate partner violence. What does that mean for him?
It means a conditional discharge and 15 months probation. If he doesn't meet the terms of that probation, then it could result in a conviction. The Canadian rosters have been set for the 2026 IFAF Flag Football World Championships. What was the biggest surprise to you?
It was the fact that Marc-Antoine Dequoy was on the roster. Not because I don't think he's skilled enough. He certainly is. I think he could be a great defensive back in the flag football game and also play offense as a receiver if you needed him to. But it seemed like when he retired from the Canadian Football League and from the NFL, short stint there, that Dequoy was done with football. But turns out he's not. Perhaps can help Canada push to get that early spot in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, when Team Canada and the women's side as well go to Dusseldorf, Germany in August to try to get one of those early spots to get to LA. The 2027 CFL Combine is heading to Calgary. Sources have confirmed to 3DownNation.com. Is that a fit?
It's kind of surprising that the same city is going to host Grey Cup and then Combine. Those two events are only 4-ish months apart. That said, I'm down for it. Maybe one day we'll get to a warmer destination for Combine, but who doesn't like the mountains? Cody Fajardo is happy the uprights are moving in 2027 after he doinked another pass off the North uprights at Mosaic Stadium. Does he have a good point?
No, he has a terrible point because I'm loving all the missed field goal returns this season. They've been the most exciting plays of 2026, and these goalposts are going to take most of them away once they are moved. I'm happy with a couple doinks if I also get a couple of Tyreek McAllisters taking it back. Flight School Elite, a youth team from Montreal, won the 2026 NFL Flag Summer Championship in Indianapolis, beating the U.S. Division champion from Miami in the final. Canadian standout Isaiah Smith was named the U15 International Division MVP, highlighted by an incredible one-handed touchdown catch in Canada's semifinal victory over Mexico. How cool is that?
It's really cool, man. I encourage everybody out there to go search Smith's touchdown because it was a great catch. And anytime Canada beats the United States in anything, sports or otherwise, but specifically for our publication in football, it is certainly notable, and it's becoming more and more and more that we see this happen. It's not something that's rare. So keep an eye out for Team Canada as they try to go to LA, as we just talked about, and also the young up-and-comers in this sport that is quickly growing in our country and around the world. Hodge, you published your annual list of Canadians and former CFL players who are competing in NFL training camps for roster spots list. Who are some names for fans to keep an eye on?
I mean, Akeem Messidor is probably the biggest name, first round pick to the Los Angeles Chargers, who won or came close to winning a national championship with the Miami Hurricanes in 2025. He should be an immediate impact maker for them. But the other name is somebody who actually is not on the list because he's not on a roster right now, and that's Eamon Ogbong-Bamiga, who was raised in Calgary. The Stampeders own his rights. He's a 5-year NFL veteran, not currently on a roster. If the Stampeders are able to bring him in, that could just raise what is already the bar for a team that's already on the upswing. For Justin Dunk and JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. We thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. Please sign up for our newsletter as well as our new Betting Insiders newsletter. Both are free and both can be canceled at any time. So why wouldn't you sign up, get all the latest news, insight, and analysis in your inbox to stay dialed in with all we've got going on?